All right, so I'm recording the lesson. What we're going to do for a little bit is kind of review back across some of the CSS topics. This is going to be important for you guys because everything that we're doing going forward is going to highly use the CSS styling sheets. So I'm going to ask some questions, and what I want you to do is post your responses in the chat room, and then we'll go from there. All right. So here's the first question. We're currently on which version of CSS, and which version has the specification still and which version is still having the specification being designed, right? So we're under CSS3, and the specification still being designed is CSS what? CSS4. Yep. CSS3 was released in 2018. CSS4 still under progress. Maybe next year it'll be released. All right, CSS stands for what? Cascading style sheets. Yeah, that's right. Cascading style sheets. And by the way, cascades is one of the things that we're going to be getting into today, because that's really one of the main powers of CSS, is being able to apply specificity with styles and have those styles inherit and cascade. So a style rule is comprised of what three elements? Do y'all remember? Style rule is comprised of what three elements? Yep. A selector, property, and value. But we call what wraps the property and value, or the collection of property values, what do we call that? We call it some type of block. What do we call that? Yeah, the declaration block. Very good. So we have a selector, a declaration block that contains property value pairs. Now, what syntax do you use for the declaration block? What syntax do you use? So you have the selector, and then you do something. What do you type? Yeah. So you have the opening curly block and the closing curly block with the property values in between, right? Yeah. All right. So a property value pair is composed of what syntax? Property value pairs. Actually, Martin has already put it on the screen. It's basically property, colon, value, semicolon, right? And in some instances, the property value will be property with a comma delimited list, right? So in a comma delimited list, you would see you'd see the selector, and then the property with value, 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 right? Can you give me an example of a property value comma delimited list? Which type of property would have that? Do you guys know? Yep, font family. Font family is the classic one that will specify a list of fonts that we want to be used, and it goes by order. It starts at the first one, says, is this available? Nope. This one? Nope. And it just goes on down the list. All right. CSS selector does what? What does a CSS selector do? What does a CSS selector do? I'll give you a hint. it determines the part of the page that will be affected, right? So if I specify an H1 as my selector, I'm saying that basically all H1s present on the page will be affected, right? Okay, so a CSS selector can be what? What different types can they be? Some of these are complex, the selectors, but give me a couple examples. Yeah, tag, root, class. Those are all very good examples. There's two other kinds you can use as well. Does anyone know the other two kinds? Yeah, the ID, very good. And the last one you can use to, it can be used to specify any element out there, whether there's a class on it or not. Do you know what that one is? What it's called? Yeah. Maybe you want to give the example. So you'd use the selector name, the square bracket, and inside the square bracket you would have the attribute, yeah, and then the attribute would say equals in quotes whatever the attribute you're trying to specify, right? All right, so how do you specify a class name selector? How would you specify a class name selector? What's the syntax for a class name selector? It's not a hashtag. What is it? There you go. Yep. Very good, Nimmerlin. It's dot and then the class name. Dot and the class name, right? Okay, what about a ID selector? How would you specify an ID selector in CSS? Yep, absolutely. It'd be hashtag and then whatever the ID name is. So if your ID value is first name, it would be hashtag first name, right? Okay, let's, what about this? How do you specify an attribute selector? An attribute selector. This is the more difficult one. All right. Right, that is a selector, but let's think about an attribute selector. The attribute selector has a little bit different name, right? So you would say the tag, bracket, the attribute name, and then the value in quotes with a closing bracket. So here's an example. Input, bracket, name equals student, right? Okay. And what syntax can be used for comments in CSS? How would you do comments? Yep, very good, Dylan. Very good. Exactly like that. So you'd have the backslash, asterisk, and then whatever your text you're trying to specify, and then closing one. All right, what about what types of comments are not supported in CSS? Yep, the double backslash, right? Also, the HTML comment is not supported in CSS. Now, the only time that the HTML comment may be useful is if you have your CSS as a tag in the head section, right? So imagine you have your your head section of your code, and in there you have a style tag. And so then in here would be your CSS, right? I'm putting this in the comments for everyone so you could see. With that example there, I could use an HTML comment, and the way I would use it would be like this. I would say, let me copy and paste because it's quicker. Right? That's how I could use the HTML comment, but I cannot use it inside the style tags, because inside the style tags, it's used for specifying the CSS style sheet. Okay. Let's see here. Can comments be nested inside of each other? What do you think? Can comments be nested inside of each other? Yeah. For some reason, my last message went to Martin. Let me post that so everyone can see it. Can y'all see that one now? Okay. I don't know how that happened. Martin is sending me private messages. It's confusing me. All right. So Clayton, you're right. No, you can't nest comments inside of each other. So if I had a comment like this with a comment inside, it wouldn't be read, because what would happen is the browser is going to interpret the first comment bracket, come up here and see this second one and stop and think everything else is supposed to be CSS. But then it's going to find this syntax and realize it doesn't match, and then the rest of your CSS won't be interpreted. Okay, how do I put comments on the same line as a property value declaration? How do I do that? How do I put comments on the same line as a property value declaration? What do you think? How about like this? So here's my property value declaration, and then there's my comment. Now, can comments break up property value declarations? No. So if I had a property value declaration like this, and then I said comment, and then that's illegal. You can't do that. You don't. In fact, even if future versions of CSS allow for this, it makes the code less readable. Always put your comments either above or to the side, but don't let it come in between and break it up. Okay. All right. Inheritance. I know we're reviewing a lot here, but this is important. Inheritance. What is it in CSS? What do you guys think? Stretch your brains here. What is inheritance? Guys have any ideas? Do you remember? Inheritance. So lower elements inherit from their ancestors or their parents. Lower elements will inherit from their ancestors or their parents. Okay, in the following example, what will be the color of the p text? Okay, in the following example. So here's the example. You have div with a class pointing at a style somewhere. This is the given. You have to just imagine with me that there's a CSS selector called red text that exists somewhere. In this code, what will be the color of some text inside the p text here? What will be the color? What do you think? Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Remember, inheritance says that your text elements are going to inherit from its parent element or the element it's embedded in, and it will take on that color. Okay, so the color will be red because it inherits from the div class red text. All right, we're going to talk some more here about inheritance because there's a little bit more I want you guys to catch. Not all properties are inherited by default, okay? Not all properties are inherited by default. For example, font family is inheritable, but border and padding, they're not. So if I had my div with a class called red text and I had a border and padding specified on it, say my border was 1 pixel with a solid black background and my padding was 5 to the left, 5 to the top, and 5 to the bottom, the P tag from the previous example would not inherit those specifications. All right, but color, font weight, they're inheritable as well. Now, you can specify the value of inherit. So if I have a border, I could say border : inherit, and it will inherit the border specification of its parent. But by default, it will not, okay? So you can force properties to inherit things with the inherit statement. Now, you don't want to have to write your code all over the place and tell it to inherit things because that gets very tedious. But it is important that you know what elements by default are inheritable and which ones are not, okay? So in the inherit keyword specifies that the property should inherit its value from its parent element and can be used for any CSS property when you use the keyword inherit. By the way, inherit was just added in CSS3. It didn't exist before that. All right, so let's talk about inheritable properties. Concerning text, you have color. You have, except for the alpha element, the hyperlink, it doesn't work on that. Direction, font, font family, font size, font style, all of these right here concerning text are inheritable. Again, except on the alpha element, the href. You know what I'm talking about, right? For lists, these would be like your unordered list, your UL tags, your OL tags, right? For these lists, list style image, list style position, list style type, these are all inheritable. Tables. We haven't gotten into table tags yet, or the table elements, but tables are also, these tags are inheritable. Border, border collapse, border spacing, caption side, empty cell, page, media, orphans, and so forth. And then, of course, you have other, which are cursors and quotes. Those are inheritable. This is a good list for you to kind of keep in mind when you're using CSS, knowing what is inheritable by default. Okay, now that we got more details on inheritance, it's time to look at cascades. So the cascade, when rules collide. CSS is called cascading style sheets. The idea being that certain selectors, they'll cascade and collide. And there are rules that apply to this, okay? So the first rule is, if you look at the examples over here on the left of this, by the way, this is taken straight out of your textbook, okay? The first rule for this P tag specifies that it's going to be a color red. But then you have a class called example. It says the color will be blue. And then you have another example of two classes. Example dot example dash 2, specifying the color. And then the third is a dot example dash 2, a color green. Okay, so the second rule here affects only those elements with a class equal to the example in HTML. So only if it equals this example. So if you look at down here at this bottom text, we know that P is going to have red text. Whereas P with a class example, it's greater specificity, is going to have blue text. Okay? And then down here we have a little bit more specific example. And this one is going to take the last rule in the CSS. So the last rule is this one, right? Because the last rule wins. So if you have two rules that are colliding, the last rule will win, right? So it's like, you know, you guys, you remember when your mom came in to tell you to do the dishes and then your dad said, don't do the dishes. And you're like, what do I do? In this case, the last rule wins, right? Could be the other way around. Maybe it was your dad told you to do the dishes and your mom said, no, don't. And you're like, okay, mom, I won't do it, right? But always remember the last rule wins, last rule. So again, work on the rule of specificity. So you have a P tag. All of these are P tags down here. The first P tag, the only reference to it is this style declaration here. The second one is this style declaration, okay? And it's more specific. And so this one is going to take not the red color, but it'll take the blue color because it has the class on it. The third one is specifying two styles. And so it's going to take one of these, right? But again, it's the last style that rules. Okay, so let's talk about the cascade here. Any style you write takes precedence. It's going to take precedence over a regular P tag, right? Now, there are three things you need to keep in mind. This is specificity, specificity, blah, blah, blah. I'm getting tongue-tied, order, and importance, all right? This is very, very important to remember, these three rules here, and they work in that order, right? So the law of specificity states that more specific the selector, the stronger the rule. And conflicting style in the stronger rule wins. So we just saw that. We had the two example classes. They're right on top of each other, right? The last one wins. Always the last one. All right, order. Sometimes the specificity is the same for competing rules. So it can't determine a winner. In that case, the order of the rules breaks the tie. Same thing again. Okay? And then we have this outlier. Now, when I was doing HTML development back in the day, I used this quite a bit because I got frustrated with how I couldn't control the code. And it was really bad for me to do this. But if by some reason you cannot control the color or the style of something because it's being inherited by another class and you really, really want it to be changed, pick up your style. At the end of your property declaration, your property value declaration there, you're going to say the exclamation point, important. And that will override all other styles. Okay? It'll override it. It'll pick it up. It'll make it the most important, the most specific. Okay. Let's pause for a second. let me go back. Let me go back. I don't recommend you do this. Okay, I don't recommend it. Again, though, if we think about specificity, you all help me here. All right, if we think about this rule, there are 3 different ways we can specify a style on the page, right? We can specify it in the style sheet. We can specify it as an embedded style in between the style tags, or we can specify it right there on the element itself using the style attribute. If you're confused by that third option, if I have, for example, I'm going to type this into the chat log here. If I have input style color red, that third style will be picked up over any style that you specify at the top of the page in the style tags or in the CSS. Okay. This third way of doing it, though, I also do not recommend you do this. It's great if you're just testing things, but my old tech lead at Hewlett Packard, when I worked on Fort Knox, he told me that when we try to do things quick and dirty, he said, dirty remains long after quick is gone. And it's the truth. You make a change and you say, well, I'll just come back and I'll make it right. I'll do it the right way later. What ends up happening is that you forget about it, and those changes will come back and bite you later. You'll be wondering, why won't it change? It just won't change. And then you're looking at the code and then you realize what you did. Okay. So property values. Each CSS property has a different rule of what values it can accept. There are too many to list here in this class for this course. Some of these, well, it goes on pages and pages. This is why it's good to keep a handy reference available for yourself. And this is why it's also good to use a integrated development environment like Atom, or there's a number of different integrated development environments you can use. For example, you could use IntelliJ or NetBeans or Eclipse. Microsoft has a number of tools available as well. You always want to use one because it'll help you to input the right values. Okay. All right. Inherit and none are 2 property values that you can always use if you don't know them. Inherit, if it doesn't have a parent, it's the equivalent of saying none. And if there is a parent and you don't want it to inherit it, you could say none. Inherit and none can always be used as property values. There's also the predefined property values. For example, when we have float, you can take an image and you can tell it to float to the right on the page, or the image tag could float to the left, or the text block, either way, right? And so the 3 predefined values for that are left, right, and none. Lengths and percentages. Lengths, they must always be explicit. They have to be explicit and they have to state the unit of measurement. For example, font size. Notice here in the example, I say font size : .875 EM. That is a unit, and I'm explicit about the size and the unit. Or if I state it as font size 14px. Another example is percentages. You always have to put the percentage if the value takes a percentage. So width is 80%, or height is percent, right? There are a few here that take bare property values. And these are line height, line dash height, opacity, and z-index. Line dash height, opacity, and z-index. Your line height is exactly what it means. It's the height of the text from the next level. So you're specifying a type of line height there. You may have seen that if you're using like Microsoft Word, you can specify the spacing, right? Or the line height. Opacity is referring to how transparent the image, the color, or the text is. And Z-index refers to your stacking of elements on top of each other. So Z1 is the very bottom. Z5000 would be way up here, right? So by specifying a Z-index, you're telling items that they have to have a certain index when they overlap. And that gives you the ability to determine what things should overlap and be visible as opposed to others. All right, other property values. So we have URLs, right? You guys are familiar with URLs. The big example here is the background image. So in this example, we have background dash image. We specify a URL, and we say URL parenthesis file.extension. All right, so file.extension is the path and the file name. We close that with a closing parenthesis and then the semicolon. You can have on your HTML page, you can specify an image that is behind everything. And this is how you would do it with background image. There are other properties here that you can use as well to specify the size and width if the background image is going to repeat. Some people like to have, you know, stars just all across the back of their page repeating. All right, CSS colors. This is going to be important for you guys. In CSS3, they made available things like the RGB alpha and the HSLA, or the HSL alpha. Typically, you have your colors are defined in either hexadecimal or RGB format. HSL is a new one, and of course the RGBA and the HSLA are new as well. The A in RGB, it refers to the alpha transparency. So it is how much you want a particular image to fade out so you can see it in behind something else. It's very useful, especially if you have pings that are that have transparent backgrounds. You can have them display and do really wonderful things for your layout. All right, these are your predefined colors. These are 16 predefined, so you could say aqua, black, blue, fuchsia, gray, green, lime, maroon, right? You can just use these right away. But you notice underneath it, it also has the hexadecimal. Okay? And we're going to talk about how you can control the color and what these hexadecimals and what the RGB means in a moment, like right now. So RGB stands for red, green, blue. This is very interesting. I know everyone's going to crack up laughing here, but if you peer close into your monitor, you'll see a tiny pixel. Some of you are starting to move in really close now. You'll see tiny pixels on your monitor, and they're red, green, and blue. And the reason they're done that way is your eyes actually have red, green, and blue cones, right? Or is it rods? I may have got that backwards. But they have these red, green, and blue receptors in your eye. You don't have a white receptor, believe it or not. What's interesting, though, and you ladies are probably going to get a kick out of this, is that there is a small population that only occur with women who have a fourth color receptor. Did y'all know that? And it gives you the ability to see variations of color that other people cannot see. Now, I was talking to a friend who has this, and he said it drove him crazy because he'd be ready to go out to eat, and his wife would come out, and she could never decide what colors to wear because she could see that extra variant of color and always knew when something didn't match. And of course, he would look at her and go, it's blue. Both of them are blue. What are you talking about? But there's actually an extra variant, extra color rod that a small population of females have. It doesn't occur in men at all. Anyways, that's why we use red, green, and blue. And the way you would specify the colors for each, the way you would specify your red, green, and blue colors is by using a value between 0 and 255. So the first element is your red. And so here we have the color of red between 0 and 255 is 89. For the green, they're specifying 0, meaning there is no color being transmitted for green. And then for the blue, they're specifying a 127. And what that gives them is a dark purple color. So this is how you specify your colors in RGB. You can also specify it by percents. You could say, I only want 35% of the range between 0 to 255. I want 0% here and 50% on the green. And of course, you can play around with these on your computer. You can set up a CSS style sheet and have all these different colors and play around with the different variants you can generate. So that's RGB. Hexadecimal is very similar to RGB. You're going to be using the pound sign, and then you're going to be specifying a red, a green, or a blue. Notice here it's not comma delimited. It's not wrapped in an RGB parenthesis. It's just the hashtag and then the color sequence. The hexadecimal works off of the principle of, I think it's up to 16. We'll come back to that. But anyways, it uses, you get to a certain number, and instead of specifying a number, it uses A, B, C, D, E, F. It stops at F. Okay, that's the hexadecimal. All right, so let's talk about RGB alpha. RGB alpha gives you, again, the ability, it's red, green, blue, but the fourth parameter gives you the transparency. So in this example here, you see normal color of RGB 60, 143, and 0. This has no alpha transparency specified on it. The next one is 25% transparency. And so the way they do the transparency here is they specify it by 0.75, right? So I only want 75% of my image to be visible, which means that it's 25% transparent. Or I could specify that I want 60% transparent by specifying 0.4 to be visible. Okay? So that's how you would specify your RGB, your alphas. All right, any questions so far? I want to encourage you guys to stand up, stretch your arms, kind of take a break here, because I know it's very easy to have the Z monster attack you. And I'm not talking about the Z index monster either. Kind of stretch, and we'll jump back into this in a second here. When we think about RGB, this becomes important when you have the RGB alpha and the HSLA alpha. These all become important when you're talking about how you overlay things, okay? So imagine that you have a background image. So you have background dash image specified for, say, your body tag. And the background image is maybe a beautiful picture of a sunset here on SitePan. Then you have your text, and you want the text to kind of maybe fade off into the distance, going up into the sky. So you would start maybe with your bottom text, and then you go to your next paragraph will be a little bit more transparent, and then your top text will be even more transparent. So you get that graduated fading effect, right? When you do that, it gives you the illusion that you can see through it. That's how the transparency works. Okay. Let's see where we are at now. We've already talked about these. Yep. Okay. Any questions so far, guys? There's a lot of information I just threw at you, and really the only way to apply this is now to talk about it and to code it. So let's go ahead and open our assignment for today. You should download a homework 6 zip. I'm going to copy this and put it into my folder I created for this class. Paste it in here. We'll unzip it. Okay, so we have our instructions. Let's open up the instructions and take a look at what we have to do today. You're going to notice a couple of things right off the bat. First of all, you see a background image. You're going to see variations of transparency. You're going to see the HSLA option. And we didn't talk about HSLA today. We're going to work through that together. And let's see what else. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to open up the Atom browser. And go to File. Going to add a project folder. Homework 6. Okay, so there's my Homework 6 folder. Go ahead and close some of these other things. In our images, we have a background image, which is just this, I don't know what that is, green looking webbing. I don't know. All right, so we need to create a index HTML. So right click on your Homework 06 folder, create a new file. We'll just call it our index.html. Again, you all let me know if I'm going too fast, and so we can all stay together. We're going to use the type ahead tool that Atom gives us just by typing HTML and hit enter, and it should pre-populate all of that. Okay, let's go down and look now at our directions. So we need to create a CSS file. And we're going to apply the following settings. All right. The CSS file is in a CSS folder, so we're going to create a new folder inside of our homework 06. We'll call it CSS. And we'll create a new file in our CSS, and we're going to call this file, we're going to call it hw06.css. Okay? That is our CSS file. Now let's jump back to our index.html. And right here underneath the meta tag, you're going to type link. Should generate your rel attribute for style sheet. And it's going to create this href CSS master. So just make sure you take out the leading backslash, and then we'll come over here and type in the name of the style sheet we're after, hw06.css. And it's a good idea to have the closing bracket tag there. Okay. Everyone good? Okay, so I don't know if they specify anything in here about what the title is supposed to be. I think it just says homework 6 on the image. So we're just going to type up here in the title, homework 6. All right. And in here, they're using the file name hw06.html. I'm not going to grade you off on that. If you use index.html, that's fine for me. Okay. And as long as this is saved in a hw06 folder, when you zip it up, it'll be self-contained. All right. So we have a number of things that we need to create here. We need to apply an h1 element. So let's go ahead and in our body tag, create an h1. And the h1 element needs to say what? It needs to say CSS222 web design and programming. We'll save that. And then we need, looks like another H element. I think that's probably an H2 element. Yep, it is an H2. So I'm going to hit enter, H2. And the H2 element is what? It is, whoops. I cannot type for some reason. Here we go. Homework, number 6, -CSS, building blocks. All right. I'm going to go ahead and open up my Chrome browser for a moment and make sure that I can see what I have typed so far. So again, I'm navigating to my NMC folder, CSS222. We're going to homework 6, and we're going to pull up the index.html. All right, so far, that's what we have. Okay. The next element, I'm assuming this is a P tag. Let's come down here, though, and just kind of go through this a little bit. Yeah, let's go ahead and create a P tag. And if you right click on these, you can go down to beautify editor contents and it'll reformat things for you to make it look nice. Okay, so we're going to type in the following statement. The following paragraph displays different transparency levels. And we have 0%, 20%, 40%, 60%, 80%, and 100%. Close the parenthesis there. I'm going to go back down to the next line. Makes it a little easier to read. Let's see. And this is in yellow text using the RGB alpha option. Okay. Make sure what we have is readable so far. Now we're going to start applying our CSS. Okay, so number one, we're going to change the color of the P element and this element, right? Number 6 says we're going to apply a body style that points at the background. So we're going to jump into our CSS, and let's go ahead and do number 6 first. So we'll say body selector. We're going to go down to background image, URL, and remember we specify the path, which is in the image directory, and it's called background-02.jpg. All right, we'll close that. Come up here, refresh it. All right, let's look at our style here. What are we missing? I think this might have to be in quotes, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, I'll give you a second here as I look at this again. Well, shucky darn. What are we missing, guys? Background dash image, colon, URL, parenthesis. Ah, that's why. HW06.CSS. Okay. You guys see what I'm doing to troubleshoot this? Using the inspect element here. Okay, so this file is not found. Image background 02. All right, so let's look at it. IMG background dash 02. Oh, that's not good. If you'll notice what I'm looking at on the screen, as I hover over it, it gives me the path. It says HW06/CSS image, right? And we know that's not the path. Path is always king. So we got to make sure we specify the path. There you go. Did y'all see that? This is important for us when we think about where this is located. Our CSS is located in the CSS directory. The image is located in the image directory. So if I'm inside the CSS directory, I have to go up to this level and then come back down to image. And so that's how we're doing it. .. /image, so forth. Okay? That's how we resolve the path. Now, when you're on a web server, you can just use the /image because it will, or /CSS because it recognizes the root of the web server. But when you're doing it locally on your box, your laptops or whatever, you run into this problem. Okay, so let's go back up. We need to specify number one, which is the color style for the header. The header is H1 and should be a size increase to 200%. All right, so we're going to come in here. We're going to type H1. We're going to say font size. Right? Is that valid? It's also a different font, right? So think about how we specify the font colors here. Let's take that out for a moment. In our body, we could specify font, family, Tahoma, Verdania, Helvetica, Arial, sans serif. We'll refresh it. Now it gives us that look. Okay. H2 H2 is supposed to be the color white. So let's go ahead and set H2 to the color white. All right. And the paragraph should be white. right? So let's think about cascading here and inheritance. Do we really want to make H2 white and the paragraph white and this paragraph white, or should we put that style somewhere else? Think about that. If we just go ahead and say color white, do we have to have this? See? So now we've specified white across our paragraph tags, and it carries in our H2 as well. All right, so number 3 is this little EM area, right? So we need to go back to our index. We're going to change this with a tag and put EM for emphasis. We'll refresh it, and we get the italicized. Let's go back to our CSS, and we're going to just come down here, just say EM color is yellow. Refresh it. Oops, what do we do wrong? Oh, did you see that, what I did? Forgot to put the correct closing tag. All right, let's make sure you have the right opening and closing tags, otherwise you end up with that. Let me refresh it now that I fixed it. All right, so I've got RGBA option. Now I've got this number 4 section here. Number 4 is this transparency setting. Okay, so let's go down to number 4 and look at that. Number 4 is using the RGB style transparency. And we're going to go, first line is 0 level transparency all the way up to 100. So let's come back in here to Atom. And if we look at this, it almost looks like it's using some type of list item, right? Doesn't really say though, does it? Let's go ahead and use a P tag, but let's be smart here. So we're going to say P, and then we're going to say class. Whoops. Class. And we'll say this class is going to be our RGB 0. And inside of it, we'll type transparency 0%. Okay. All right. I'm going to save time. So we're going to copy, paste, 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 paste. We'll change this one to 20, 40, whoops, 40, 60, 80. We need to do it again, right? And this class is going to be RGB 100. We'll come over here. We'll say 0, 20%, 40%, 60%, 80, whoops, did it again, 80%, and 100. Now, I haven't specified this class yet, right? So let's just go ahead and make sure that what we have displays on the screen before I specify the class. All right, so there it is. I haven't specified the class that this should be some type of yellow. So let's go back here, and we're going to just copy just that little piece right there. we'll come in down here and we're going to say RGB, whoops, forgot something. I put a dot in front of it, right? Because this is, we're specifying selectors. That's how we got to do it. And then we need to say color RGB A. I need to specify the parenthesis. All right, so how do we get yellow? We got red, green, and blue, and then our alpha. So let's just see here. Let me see. The RGBA color that we're going to use is 255, 255, 0, and then we need to specify the alpha. And in this case, our alpha is 0. All right, so let's go back to our image. We'll refresh it. Oh, that didn't work. That didn't work. Let's go back and look at what we said in our slide deck today. So if we're looking at the RGB alpha, so we have to specify how much is transparent. And I went all the way to 0, which means 100% transparent. So let's go back to Atom, and we'll change this to 1. There we go. 1 stands for 100%, right? Thinking about our math again. So 1, if it's less than 1, it would be a point something. All right. So now that we got that straightened, I'm going to, again, to make this quick, I'm going to copy and paste it several times. We got 20, 40, 60, 80. Oh my goodness, Mike. All right. And 100. So if we want 20% transparency, that means that we need 0.8. If we want 40%, it means we need 0.6. If we want 60%, we need 0.4. You guys get the idea, right? 0.2, and then all the way down to 0. All right, so let's go back and refresh it. And there you go. You got your transparency levels all the way down to where you can't see it. I'm highlighting it with my cursor, but you can't see it anymore. Okay, so now we need to do similar text, but we're going to be using the HSLA. So we'll go over here to our index. I'm going to copy all of this again because I don't like to retype everything. And I'm going to say transparency levels and yellow text. We're going to change this to HSLA. We'll change these to the HSL. Because it's roughly all the same. We're creating these classes on the fly, right? Okay. I'm going to refresh my screen. And we've got a lot of the stuff set. All right, number 3 though, let's look at number 3. Make sure we're applying the right one. So number 3, is it number 3? Yes, so number 3 and number 4. So number 3 is correct. We're using the same color sequence to generate that. This right here. Whoops. This piece and this piece. But now we have to use the HSLA. Okay. All right. So first things first, what is the color for our HSL? Let's go back over to our style and let's change, well, let me copy this because it's just a matter of just changing a few things. I'm going to put a comment in here. This is my HSLA stuff. And over here, this is my RGBA stuff. It's a great comment, right? All right. So now we need to change this. So I'm going to change HSL. Remember, these are just class names, right? You could call them whatever you want, really. But we're trying to make our class names semantically close to what we're doing. And if I was really going to be precise, I would say HSLA-0, but I'm not. But they're just class names. So I just want to make sure my class names match, matches what is in my index, my index HTML. So HSLA 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 100, right? Did I miss anything? Okay. All right. Okay. So the color for HSLA for yellow is a little bit different than RGB. The first one is 60. Next one is 100%. And the last number here is 50%. Okay. Let me pull up real quick here. Make sure I've got the right syntax. Now, we didn't talk about the HSLA, but if you look in your textbook, you're going to notice that let me actually just paste this. So you can see it in the slide deck. Okay, can everyone see that? If you can't, let me know. The HSL, what that stands for is hue, saturation, and lightness. Okay, I'll just type it in here so you guys can see this. Hue, the saturation, and lightness. That's how you determine your color setting. The transparency role, the alpha transparency part, is exactly the same as everything else we've done so far. All right. So let's go ahead and figure this out. So we have this color set here. I'm going to go ahead and refresh it real quick, the page, and just see what we have. And right now, Transparency is 0. I think my color is off. I'm going to post a site that you guys can go to. And this should help you. Where is the chat log at? Where do you go? Okay. If you guys go to this site, this is a color picker. And what they do is they give you the ability to generate the HSL setting, the RGB, or the hexadecimal setting. Okay? It's a great little tool to have. It'll help you out quite a bit. And I should probably mention there are other colors that you can use as well that we're not getting into for CSS. Like there's the HWB, the CMYK. There's a lot of those that are possible, but we're only looking at pretty much just the standard color sets right now. Okay, let me go back here and see why this may not be working. So we got 60, 150. 60, 150. Well, that's why. There we go, right there. Right? So there's my HSLA. So I'm going to copy just this piece and paste it across, because I really don't want to have to type all that again. And just again to help you guys, I'm going to put a hyperlink in here in the video text in the as a comment. And since we are recording this is a great site to go to for figuring out your colors. It's a great tool for that. Okay, so I've got everything set. Let's go back to our CSS. We'll refresh it. And now we're seeing exactly what we should be seeing, right? So let's inspect it. We see there's our style. If I click on it, there's our HSLA. And of course, you can as well, if you're using Chrome, you can inspect it, you can click on it, and you can set any color variant you want. For example, you could have it be, say, a blue, right? You can adjust the transparency, and you can see right here that it's actually doing the same thing that we would be doing. It's setting the percent value, right? And it just works. All right, so I'm going to turn all that back up, put it back on yellow, so you can see what we have. All right, guys, any questions so far? You got to experiment a little bit today with doing some things with your background colors, your background images, a lot of different things. Any other questions you may have? You guys are quiet. You guys are awake, right? You're not just like surfing the web and, you know, playing Minecraft or something, right? Do you guys play Minecraft? Okay. We're done early today, and this is actually all the material that we had for this week. Again, I want to encourage you to continue to read your text. There's a lot of information in there. Next week, we'll have class on Tuesday. We will not have class on Thursday. I won't be available that day. But we will try to hammer through the majority of the material, and then of course for Thursday I'll be posting some videos to make up any of our missed content together. All right, guys, you have a good day. If you have any questions for me, we've gone through the homework assignment. Again, I want to encourage you, just get out there and play with it. Create HTML sites and learn. This is the best way you develop fluency, and everything we're doing is just going to continue to build upon each other. It's going to get more and more complex over the next few weeks. All right. See you guys.
Thank you.
Yep. Have a
Bye,
good day.
Thank you.
Mr.
Bye.
Rogers, are you going to upload this to YouTube again?
Yeah, I'm going to attempt to, now that I've recorded it via Zoom, I'll attempt to do that.
Okay.
All righty. See you guys.